Well, good morning to the Suppress Herald in Maine. It's 7th of June. And, let's just face it, there's nothing left but to come to the conclusion that the mainstream media are just no longer dealing with reality. And it's the propaganda machine is just in over overdrive, and they've lost their mind. They've lost their ability to reason. And I'm just going to be short today. I'm just going to deal with two subjects because I think they're the most impactful, potentially the most damaging to our society today. And it really is a matter of looking at the realities and looking at the evidence and looking at facts. And you come to the conclusion that this massive propaganda machine is really, they've lost their mind. And liberalism basically has melted their brains. There's just nothing left on reality with these people. Suppress Herald is a perfect example, and that's why I do these podcasts. It's local. As I've said, politics is local, and so is propaganda. And basically, they're just repeating these lies and manipulation of the public. And we're going to deal with two subjects today. We're going to deal with this whole thing with gender dysphoria and women's sports and men and boys playing in girls and women's sports. This is a cut and dried issue. It's a 80-20, probably more like 90-10 issue, with the 10 being just completely out of their mind, liberals. And there's no common sense, there's no rationality to the conversations and the evidence that they're putting forth that, boys and men can play in women's sports and that's all fine. But what you have is a propaganda machine, in this case, the Suppress Herald here in Maine, which is really the newspapers across the entire state, controlled by a bunch of billionaires that are liberals that are trying to seize control of our minds. And you have this very, very simple, common sense conversation, and they keep the propaganda machine publishes the letters of the people that have lost their mind. And very few letters. On occasion, they put one or two in, but over the course of weeks, it's people rationalizing and lying about transgenderism. It's called gender dysphoria. It's a mental illness. It should be treated. We should not be glorifying and promoting and grooming, especially young children. We should be getting them into treatment and getting them past it. Nobody wants someone to live with gender dysphoria, period. Nobody wants that. That's the reality. Anybody that would put onto their child gender dysphoria is the same as putting cancer onto your child. I'm sorry. It's not a positive thing for their development and for their life, period. This is common sense. This is just insanity that we're having these conversations. We should be focused 100% on treatment and figuring out how this is happening, that this is an explosion of gender dysphoria in our society. Why is this happening? And we probably ought to be focused on that. It is not a positive thing for society, period. And you cannot deny that. You cannot say, it is so great that my child has gender dysphoria. I am so happy for him or her. Whatever it is. And there is the problem. And so you have the Suppress Herald that continues to publish these just nonsensical letters that are supporting this. And here's the headline of a letter published just today in the Suppress Herald. It's time to put the trans athletes debate to rest. And it is. But unfortunately, this is just gobbledygook garbage. It's let's put this debate to rest with the following facts. Okay. Trans athletes, especially trans women, have been playing in women's sports for decades. Yeah, and winning trophies and beating up women and girls, injuring them. We've got all the evidence of that. There's case after case. And so yeah, they've been that doesn't mean it's right. I mean, we had slaves for decades. We had slaves forever in the South. That doesn't mean it's right. Underrepresented in all levels, from high school to professional sports, trans athletes who compete don't often dominate their sport. BS. Trans athletes that are, if you have men and boys playing in women's or girls' sports, they do dominate mostly. At the least, they're not competing on a fair level playing field, and we know that. That's why they have men's and women's sports. If we continue down this track, we will no longer have men and women's sports. It won't mean anything. Women will be out, and it already is happening. There are cases in some states where first, second, and third place, gold, silver, bronze, were taken by boys running in track and field. The women, the girls, didn't make the podium at all. Don't get this is a lie. But the suppressed Herald is more than happy to publish this. The Journal of Sports Medicine, in a 2021 study, found emphatically that there is no scientific evidence that would support policymakers' attempts to ban trans women in sports. Bullshit. Sorry, I try not to swear on this podcast, but that is absolute BS. Physiologically, scientifically, men and women, boys and girls are not the same. Boys have significant athletic advantages, period. Why do you think they have men and women's sports? How many times has a woman competed with men and come out on top? Never. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Name me one sport where women beat men. It doesn't happen. This is common sense. We've basically thrown common sense completely out the window, citing some study done by a bunch of lib wackos to put this in. A 2024 study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine concludes that trans women may have several physical disadvantages. BS. If that's the case, why do we have men and women's sports? Despite the science, some policymakers continue to scapegoat trans women athletes, creating an environment of fear, misinformation, and discrimination. Sorry, this is garbage. This is pure, unadulterated garbage. Let's put it to rest, all right? But this paper, the Suppress Herald, continues to just, they publish the letters from the trans athlete supporting, gender dysphoria supporting writers and editorials 10 to 1. And yet it's a 10 to 1 in the other direction conversation, because the people with common sense are 10 to 1 that men and boys should not be playing with women and girls in sports or in their locker rooms or in their restrooms or any of that. That's fact. And the girls and women in those locker rooms and restrooms don't want guys in their bathrooms and locker rooms. It's just a straight up fact. And the fact that this Suppress Herald organization and their liberal policies continue to promote as if and create the image that there are many, many more, hundredfold more people that support this than actually do is exactly what propaganda is all about. That's where we're at. We've lost reality, we've lost common sense, and yet here we are with a failing newspaper that continues to, until the day they die, they will go down in flames because I believe that the Suppress Herald will not survive over the next year or two. They're already laying people off. They're shrinking the paper. They're not printing papers that they used to, the weeklies and so forth. They don't print them anymore. It's all digital. They're going down. They're crashing, and they don't get it. They don't get it that the reason they're crashing is crap like this. They're telling their entire audience, don't believe your lying eyes. We, the news, are going to tell you what's out there. And even though we're lying and it's nothing but propaganda, you've got to believe it. I think one of the best is, you know, they they publish this letter. Think about what it means to be transgender. Far from a wedge issue, we're your neighbors, coworkers, and your friends. Well, that's all fine. This is all just emotional, 100%. And this is the funny part. I'm not going to read this. I'm not going to go into this, but that's the headline, okay? Is basically far from a wedge issue, we're your neighbors, coworkers, and friends. Yeah, but you shouldn't be playing in, boys should not be playing women's sports, okay? That's all fine. You want to be transgender, that's your thing. But when it impacts other people, then people have to stand up and say something. And if you don't like that, that's too bad. It's just, what if boys just started playing in women's sports all over the place? Because that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. Why do we have to be transgender? Why don't we just allow boys to play in girls' sports, men to play in women's sports? No more WNBA. All the guys that flunked out of the NBA that didn't make the cut in the NBA, the worst basketball players from the NBA could go and play in the WNBA and they'd win every game. So what's the point here? But they just keep after this. And this is the big thing is when you don't have facts, common sense, reality on your side, appeal to emotions. Oh, we just want to be part of society. We just blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry, but I am not going to give up my reality and I am not going to throw common sense and reality and the truth out the window so that you'll feel better. You can feel just fine, do your thing, but don't go into and play where you shouldn't be in sports. Do not basically infringe on other people around you for your benefit so you feel better. So basically, the reality is you should be getting help, psychological help, because gender dysphoria is a mental issue. But they just keep at it. And this is the Suppress Herald keeps publishing these letters and editorials, and it's just not real. Now, on that track, here's something that appeared in the Suppress Herald, and this was about a week ago, a little over a week ago, but I just saved it. And this is like the most incredible thing is when a newspaper, supposed, has what I'm going to share with you. When they do this, it kind of tells you something ain't right. And this is the headline. Maine Trust for Local News begins fact-checking operation in partnership with GigaFact. Veteran reporter and former Suppress Herald writer and editor J. Craig Anderson will produce twice-weekly fact briefs to either verify or debunk online claims related to Maine news. So now they're going to decide what's right and what's real. And this is from a former Suppress Herald writer and editor. Okay. So this guy who worked for the propaganda machine, the Suppress Herald, who we have exposed as being extremely biased and full of shit with all of their reporting, is now going to be the fact checker. And they're going to be doing fact checking on their own operation. I can guarantee you that this is going to be nothing but lies. It's basically manipulation and screening to make sure that everything is liberal and in line with their political and personal bias. What a joke. The Suppress Herald is going to do fact checking. I'm sure they'll do a good job with my Suppress Herald podcast. I'm sure they'll be fact checking that. It's crazy. So that's an obvious one that is just so basic and fundamental. Men and women are different, and men and women have their own sports for reasons that are irrecontrovertible. You cannot challenge the fact that men and women are different, and that's why we have men and women's sports. So men and boys can't play in women's sports and call it fair. Period. Done. There is no disputing that. But we're in a world where reality is out the window. Now I want to turn to something that hasn't been in the news as much, but it's starting to pop up again because they're, starting to get into political season and people talking. And of course, you have Trump's White House, and the Trump administration is challenging the global warmists on reality. And now I'd like to just delve into this a little bit because you've got this came up. This is just in the paper this week. Pope Francis's words on climate change should guide Maine forward. Opinion. We stand to suffer greatly under a Trump budget that includes harsh measures on energy and climate. Okay, so here we are, the climate alarmists, the climate extremists, the climate crazies, and I'm going to just go through a few things that have happened, and you can get a little bit of a take on why we should question this alarmism. This year marks the 10th anniversary of Pope Francis' 2015 encyclical Laudato Si', a groundbreaking letter to the entire world addressing global warming and the unjust pillaging of our common home. And it just goes through and talks about global warming. And of course, now Trump is talking about cutting all of the garbage out of the global, Green New Deal. And what this paper publishes, what the Suppress Herald puts in the paper for letters and articles, and what they don't should really cause you to give pause. And of course, this letter goes through this is a paragraph. The cruelty and recklessness of this legislation couldn't be more transparent. Cutting $800 billion from Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. Okay, well, most of that is taking and telling states that you can't give illegal immigrants taxpayer dollars for Medicaid. Not a big deal to me. Cutting food assistance, cutting off people that are, we've read the stories. Of course, this paper doesn't like to print the stories, but right here in Maine, we've had people that are scamming the food assistance programs, basically food stamps, scammed millions of dollars running food stamps through their grocery stores and so forth. There have been stories on it, but not reported very much by the Suppress Herald. Increasing healthcare costs by an average of $180 per month for tens of thousands. We don't know that, and they're jumping the gun on that. And it just goes on accusing him of all these things with the, now it's climate change. Let's look at it, climate change. Let's look at one particular piece of climate change. I want to go back, and this is something you can do for yourself. It doesn't take a genius. I just did a search, a Google search. I put in Arctic ice, Arctic ice, and then just go through. And I'll start with Yale Environment 360, the Yale School of the Environment, the Yale Lib Wackadoodle School. And this article was originally published by The Guardian, okay, which is a really, you know, part of the Climate Desk collaboration. Okay, so these are all extremely liberal organizations and news organizations. This was in March 12th, 2020, 5 years ago. There's been a six-fold increase in polar ice cap melting since the 90s. Okay, they go through and basically we're all going to die. The ice caps are going to melt, and they go through the whole thing with all their charts and graphs and warming oceans and all the rest. Okay, so that was 2020. Then we move up. This is right from March 28th, 2025. And this is in the World Wildlife Federation, another extreme left and government funded through their nonprofit. This is the whole NGO that we discovered getting all this money through the government. Arctic sea ice maximum crisis as ice melts and risks rise. Big headline. National Snow and Ice Data Center announced that Arctic sea ice had preliminarily reached its annual maximum on March 26th, the lowest sea ice maximum on record. Okay? Another big, crazy. That was just in March this year. Now let's go to CNN. CNN Climate. Okay, CNN has a climate division. The world's ice sheets just got a dire prognosis, and coastlines are going to pay the price. In other words, we're all going to be underwater because the world's ice sheets are on course for runaway melting, leading to multiple feet of sea ice level rise. Okay. Let's move on just a little. This is in the New York Post, okay? Here's the headline. Antarctic ice has made a surprising rebound in mass, scientists say. The Antarctic ice sheet has shown signs of record-breaking growth after decades of contributing to global sea level rise, as experts reveal their theories why. Published in Science, China Earth Sciences revealed that between 2021 and 2023, the Arctic ice shelf gained mass at a rate of 108 gigatons. You do the math, that's tons with a lot of zeros. A remarkable reversal from the rapid loss seen in previous years. The researchers analyzed data from the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment and GRACE follow-on missions, which measure changes in Earth's gravity field to track ice mass fluctuations. So now we're gaining massive amounts of ice. Ice mass in East Antarctica particularly showing signs of recovery. So this, they want to dismiss it and say, well, it's just little glitch. But this wasn't in the models. Now let me read you a little bit more. This is from the CO2 Coalition, which everybody likes to discredit. But This is the headline. Arctic ice at decade-high level. Can doomsayers explain? With ice coverage for July and August remaining above the 10-year average of 2010 to 2020, this extent of summer sea ice in the Arctic has surprised experts who once predicted that such levels would be impossible. This goes on to explain that it is significantly more Arctic sea ice. And this isn't just Antarctica. If you do your research, others are publishing, including NASA and other U.S. reliable scientific organizations, both the Arctic and the Antarctic caps are significantly increasing massive amounts, gigatons of ice and snow in the last few years. And it's probably accelerated since then. They've also experienced record low temperatures in Antarctica. Antarctica reached a minus 117 degrees at the cap. This is not anywhere in the suppressed Herald now, is it? Nobody ever gets to hear this because this suppressed Herald has been putting propaganda pieces, letters to the editor, articles, all sorts of text and on and on and on about global warming. I have a stack. I actually have a bag full of papers from the suppressed Herald with all the articles and letters over the last couple of years that they have been putting in there. Never once have we seen anything about this is science and facts. This is measured massive amounts of new ice being added at the Arctic and Antarctic on the caps, which means that all that moisture is being piled up on glaciers instead of melting and raising the sea levels. The other thing is, if you go around and look at sea level rise in a lot of places, there are pictures where you can see side by side from 50 years ago, the pier in Australia and today, and it's identical. The sea level is at the same level. There are places where the actual coastline is sinking, such as down in Virginia, where the actual shelf is sinking down, and so it's not sea level rise, it's land sinking. And there's also erosion, which is causing some of this, which happens over time. So the point here is we don't have a newspaper in Maine. We've got the Suppress Herald, run by liberal activists with an agenda, politically and beyond. And I also think they're basically sheep being manipulated by the people that are driving these narratives. For whatever reason, you can figure out what the motives are. But global warming, there's no question. There's the green agenda, which translates into the global warming industrial complex. The people that are making vast amounts of money, mostly taxpayer money, off of all these programs to stop global warming, which isn't a real problem. But there's a gravy train here. And our esteemed Angus King, Senator Angus King, right here in Maine, made millions of dollars, which were originally federal taxpayer dollars, funneled through the Department of Energy and other programs to his wind project that he never actually built any windmills, pocketed millions of dollars, and then ran for Senate. And now we have his son, Angus III, is running to be the governor in his father's footsteps. Where is he? What's he been doing leading up to this? He's been at the government trough, taking government dollars, subsidies to do sustainable energy projects in Maine and probably beyond, at the trough that his father basically built. That's what the Green New Deal is all about. It's funneling money into the pockets of those that have a position to catch it. And so the global warming narrative just continues. And here we have, that's a perfect example. Is there one article in the Suppress Herald about the okay, irrefutable fact, they've measured it and they can see it, that the Arctic and Antarctic shelves sheets are being dramatically increased by gigatons of ice and snow, which is not supposed to be happening according to the models. How is this possible? This is what a propaganda machine is all about. Hopefully, slowly, people will wake up. I hope people listen to this. If you like what you're hearing, share it, send the link, follow my podcasts. The Suppress Herald gives me new material every single day because they just stay on the track right up until the time when they close the doors. And again, they haven't figured out that they've alienated half of their population, which are onto them, and we're not buying it. I don't get the paper anymore. I do it digitally. And in that regard, the Suppress Herald prevented me from commenting on their digital platform. I would try to comment on somebody's letter and was rejected, even though I had signed in and I'm a paying subscriber. And I'm having trouble reading articles and so forth. I wouldn't be surprised if they're throttling me or even trying to keep me off of their platform. They know who I am. Hi, guys at Suppress Herald. Maybe you ought to listen to some of what I have to say. You can dismiss it very easily and be mad at me, but maybe you ought to think about it, because you are lying or hiding reality from your readers. And maybe you ought to be actually working as journalists instead of political activists. So with that, it's June 7th. Here we go into the summer, and I'll be checking in regularly on what the latest local propaganda and propagandists are up to. With that, everybody have a good rest of the weekend, and we'll see you back here for the next time. This is the Suppress Herald podcast. Politics is local, and so is propaganda.